And now we're live.
Very good. We are now returning from closed session. Deputy Mayor Graham is not able, he was in closed session, but is not able to join us for the balance of the meeting. And Councillor Moore is also not with us today at the meeting. We do have a report coming forward from closed session, and that is the appointment of the library board member. I'm looking for a resolution from a member of council that council appoint Jessica Pollock to the Camonaghan Public Library Board for the balance of the 2018-2022 term of council, moved by Councillor Huntley and Councillor Belch. And before we get too much further, I'd just like to thank all of those that applied for the positions. It's nice to see when we have an abundance of applications for the various positions. It's nice to see within a thriving community that you have so many members that are willing to come forward and volunteer their time. So thank you to everybody that has applied, and congratulations to Jessica Bullock. Madam Clerk, we got a mover and seconder, and I call for recorded vote.
Mayor McFadden?
Yes.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
And Councillor Belch?
Yes.
Motion is approved. All right, our next item on the agenda is our public meeting. So I need a resolution to open the public meeting. Moved by Councillor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch?
Yes.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
And Mayor McFadden?
Yes, motion is approved. All right, Madam Clerk, our next up, we have item 7.2 is Allison Luma from Meridian Planning with the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment regulating cannabis in the township of Camonaghan.
Dear Mayor McFadden, Allison is joining us.
Very good. Welcome, Allison.
Hi, good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. I just get myself set up there. Right, are we ready to start in with the presentation then?
We are ready, Allison.
Okay, all right. So just start off, we're here for a statutory public meeting. This is for a proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and site plan application to regulate cannabis within the township. Next slide, please. So by way of background, over the past year, the township has undertaken a study to investigate how cannabis production can best be regulated in the township. The purpose of this study is to provide recommendations for commercially licensed cannabis operations. This study does not address the cultivation of cannabis for personal use or cannabis that is grown as prescribed by a physician for medical purposes. Next slide, please. There we go. So thus far in the process, a colleague of mine was in front of council approximately a year ago in December 2020 and presented a report to council at that time. At that time, council had requested that we go back and we add some more details to the report and consider some additional options, which we did do and came back with a subsequent addendum in September 2021 of this year. Following that, we had an open house on October the 18th where we presented the findings of that addendum and the final set of recommendations. And today we are now here to have the statutory public meeting to present the draft planning documents and to obtain any public comments that might be out there. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, we'll back up to the legislative context just to be sure that everybody is of the same base understanding here. So it is, in fact, the federal government that is responsible for administering Canada's cannabis production licensing process. So licenses are applied for and obtained from Health Canada, and that includes licenses to cultivate, process, package, anything to do with cannabis. As part of that federal legislation, they also divide the responsibilities for cannabis between the various levels of government. Next slide, please. So this slide is just a very quick summary of who's responsible for what. So the federal government is responsible for issuing the licenses. The provincial government authorizes the distribution and the retail sale of cannabis. And importantly, the provincial government has recognized outdoor cannabis cultivation, so that is the growing of the outdoor crops, as an agricultural operation, subject to the policies of the provincial policy statement and normal farm practices. At a municipal level, there remains a role here for municipal and lower tier governments in that the official plan and the zoning bylaw may include requirements and regulations for cannabis operations for that land use, and that license holders must correspond with the lower tier and with the township to advise of the issuance of a license or an amendment of a license, or otherwise keep the township apprised of any changes to the licensing status on a property. Next slide, please. So currently, within the township, the official plan does not contain any policies to provide regulatory guidance for cannabis facilities in the township. For the benefit perhaps of some of the people watching remotely, this does not mean that cannabis is prohibited within the township official plan. Applications can always be brought forward, or interpretations can always be made. So part of what we're doing here today is to actually put in place some policies within the official plan to regulate cannabis. The township zoning bylaw, it does have some requirements for cannabis facilities as contained in section 11.7 of the zoning bylaw currently. A cannabis production facility is currently permitted as of right in the urban employment zone. So that is the employment zone within the Millbrook area. Next slide, please. So the municipality has a number of tools that they can rely upon to regulate cannabis. So as I stated earlier, there's the official plan, the zoning bylaw, and site plan. And again, perhaps just very briefly for the benefit of people watching, the official plan is the broad-based policy document for the township. It identifies essentially categories of land uses, and the policies that it contains are very broad and overreaching. The zoning bylaw actually implements those official plan policies. So the zoning bylaw is in fact a statute, and it provides very detailed regulations for the land use. Site plan control is something that happens at a property level. So that includes things like where exactly on a very specific piece of property will buildings be located, setbacks, etc. So, I mean, that was just for the benefit of some people who are watching to make sure that the terminology is all consistently understood. So within the township, these three tools all work together to effectively regulate land use, and in particular, cannabis. So at the present time now, council has given direction to update the township's planning documents, those three documents I just talked about, so that there is a uniform approach to how cannabis is regulated in a more comprehensive way. Next slide, please. So a few details of the tools that we're looking at. So the official plan amendment, it now incorporates policies that regulate cannabis production facilities and outdoor cannabis cultivation. And the distinction there is that cannabis production facilities only occur within wholly enclosed buildings, whereas outdoor cannabis production or outdoor cannabis cultivation is crops. It literally is the outdoor growing of cannabis. The official plan specifies in what designations these uses will be permitted, and it also includes a number of use-specific policies for how such uses may or may not be established. Next slide, please. So these are the definitions that are being put in place. They are consistent across the official plan and the zoning bylaw. They do tie back to the federal legislation as well. So as you can see here, cannabis production is any building or structure that is used for cultivation, producing, packaging, etc. Whereas outdoor cannabis cultivation is strictly the growing of cannabis as an outdoor crop. Next slide, please. So this little chart provides a summary of how this is being applied within the township at the official plan level. So a cannabis production facility, keeping in mind that is an indoor facility, will be permitted or is proposed to be permitted as of right within the employment areas, urban and rural, and within the agricultural and rural areas. However, it's only permitted subject to a zoning bylaw amendment. So what this means is that if a property owner, say in an employment area, has a piece of land and they see they're permitted as of right in the official plan, this does not give them the necessary permissions to go ahead and establish the use. They still must go through a zoning bylaw amendment process and site plan control. Outdoor cannabis cultivation, again, which is field crops, is permitted as of right in agricultural areas. And you will also note that an indoor cannabis production facility is not permitted as of right in the ag and rural areas. In all cases, there is a 300-meter minimum separation distance that is required from surrounding sensitive land uses. And that is also carried forward into the zoning bylaw, which is very specific. So that 300-meter setback, it actually does apply to both the indoor and the outdoor cannabis cultivation. Next slide, please. So this is the slide regarding the setbacks, which I just spoke about. So that minimum 300-meter separation distance. Sensitive land uses, those are any land uses such as residential uses, community uses such as schools, parks, community centers. Sensitive land uses are something that are identified and defined by the province. So we take our lead from that in terms of defining what constitutes a sensitive land use. And in terms of outdoor cannabis cultivation, in terms of crops must be set back a minimum of 50 meters from the lot line of the lot on which the crop is located. So that is what is being proposed in terms of setbacks going forward there. Next slide, please. So the official plan policies contain a number of very use-specific policies. They also establish a number of development criteria for council to consider when a zoning bylaw amendment application comes forward. Among these, the policies include mitigation of adverse effects, no outdoor storage is permitted in association with a cannabis facility. Cannabis production facilities may only be permitted in new purpose-built buildings, so no retrofits. All are subject to site plan control. And there are a number of the criteria that must be considered prior to municipal approval. And that includes such issues as groundwater, natural heritage, environmental impacts, servicing, whether it's out in a rural area, which would be hydrogeological studies, which would be required, or servicing studies within town, waste management, parking, and traffic. So there are a number of prescribed considerations in evaluating a zoning bylaw amendment application that may come forward. The official plan also identifies a number of studies that must be submitted in conjunction with the zoning bylaw amendment application. Now, this is not unusual. The back of your official plan, I believe it's section 8.4, there is a recipe list there of a various number of studies that staff may request as part of a complete application process. That's quite normal with any planning application. But what we've done in the OP policies is to identify a minimum set of required studies that if a cannabis application is brought forward, these studies must accompany it. And these include land use compatibility study. So that looks at what sensitive land uses are surrounding the proposed site, hydrogeological studies, servicing studies, stormwater management and a stormwater management plan, odor management study and an odor management plan, as well as a waste management study. So there are a number of information requirements that any applicant would need to bring forward. And finally, cannabis processing is only being contemplated as an agriculture-related use, which means it can only be considered on a lot where the primary activity is the cultivation of cannabis, and that the agricultural related use being the cannabis processing would be secondary to that. Worth also pointing out, though, that even as an accessory use, such a use must be licensed by Health Canada. All activities related to cannabis on a property must be licensed. Next slide, please. So the zoning bylaw amendment being brought forward will amend the township's comprehensive zoning bylaw. It will replace and strengthen the current regulations that are in place. The zoning bylaw amendment adds a number of use-specific provisions. It adds a number of new definitions to the zoning bylaw. These are definitions that include things like adverse impact, cannabis production facility, outdoor cannabis cultivation, sensitive land uses are just some of those. It is proposed that we will be deleting the as of right permission for cannabis, a cannabis production facility in the urban employment zone. So this is the existing as of right permission in Millbrook will be deleted. That said, if there are any existing such facilities in that Millbrook area, they would then become legal non-conforming. We are adding as of right permissions for outdoor cannabis cultivation to the agricultural and rural zones. And what this is actually doing is it is distinguishing between a broader generic permitted use of agricultural use, and we're being very specific to say that wild cannabis cultivation, outdoor cultivation, is the growing of crops. It is a very specific type of growing of crops that has very specific requirements, and we're distinguishing between those two within the bylaw to allow us to implement the additional requirements. And we're also providing a number of use-specific regulations to direct how cannabis may or may not occur. Next slide, please. So again, a cannabis production facility, again, which is the indoor facility, is only permitted by zoning bylaw amendment. And the outdoor growing of cannabis cultivation will be permitted as of right, specifically in the ag zone, the rural zone, and the Oak Ridges Marine Countryside Zone. Next slide, please. So section 11.7, which contains the existing use-specific provisions in the bylaw, will be deleted in its entirety, and we are replacing it with a new set of regulations and some strengthened regulations. So some of these include only the uses of a single license holder may be permitted on any single lot. Other than cultivation, all other cannabis uses may only occur within a wholly enclosed building. Such uses are only permitted in new purpose-built buildings. We've introduced lot and setback requirements associated with this use. There is no outdoor storage permitted in association with a cannabis use. We've brought forward minimum parking and loading requirements, the loading in particular, given the truck traffic that would be needed. We have also stipulated that a cannabis use is not permitted on a lot with a bed and breakfast establishment, agritourism use, home business, or home industry. There is no accessory sale of cannabis, and it will be subject to site plan control. So even in the agricultural area, any buildings that are associated with the cannabis operation are subject to site plan control. Next slide, please. So site plan control is the final piece of the suite of tools being brought forward today. We are updating the site plan control bylaw. This is to bring this into line with the zoning bylaw amendment and ensure consistency between the two. Site plan control does apply across the township. And quite simply, it just says that the amended site plan control bylaw specifies that any buildings or structures associated with cannabis are not exempt from site plan control. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, the township is going to receive comments on the draft official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment through the statutory public meeting. Also, written submissions are, if you want to send those into the township, are welcome. Concurrent with that very public process, the township will be circulating these documents to agencies and the County of Peterborough to obtain comments in that regard. Moving forward, council adoption of the final official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment and site plan control will occur, at which point the official plan amendment, after it's adopted by council, needs to go to the County of Peterborough for approval. Next slide, please. Actually, just backing up one slide, sorry. In terms of next steps, there is also going to be a subsequent public meeting in January, and perhaps we can have John confirm that in his report on his planning report. I believe it's the middle to the end of January, but council has requested that we do bring this forward for another second public meeting to provide the public with ample opportunity to provide comments. Next slide, please. And if you do have comments, Mr. John Connolly, who is the Executive Director of Planning and Development at the Township, you can direct your comments to him via either email, or his telephone contact information is there as well. Next slide, please. And that's it. So then I would open that up now for questions.
Very good. Any member of council have any questions at this point for Allison? Councillor Huntley?
Through you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation, Allison. It was great. I guess we're one more step down this process. I did have a couple maybe clarifications that you had in what was being replaced in section 11.7. I'm not sure which page that was. 15 of your slides, I think it was when it went by. But there are two things. One being, maybe it's just more of a clarification component, is no outdoor storage. I assume that means of cannabis itself, because obviously, there'll be equipment and things like that could potentially be stored outside. Like, do we need to be a little tighter on what outdoor storage means?
That is something that we can take under advisement and take a look at, but you are correct. The intent is that there's no outdoor storage of finished products, supplies, that sort of thing with the cannabis operation. So it has been written such that there's no outdoor storage permitted in association with a cannabis operation. But we can take a closer look at that and see if the wording needs refined somewhat.
Thank you. And then the second one is when the not permitted within the bed and breakfast, agritourism, home business, or home industry. That one I'm a little skeptical of, as as the world has changed and most people are working from their homes now. I mean, you could have, partners, perhaps, one's, has a, cannabis industry while the partner is, making quilts or soap or something in their house. Like, does that prevent that from occurring?
Yes. So keeping in mind that these provisions apply to commercial operations, so not personal use and not medicinal use. This is in part motivated by land use compatibility in terms of compatible uses, because the range of home-based businesses that you can have is quite broad, and in part through security concerns. I don't know how that relates to specifically to the security concerns within the actual Health Canada licensing. But again, in terms of zoning, if there is a unique situation where somebody feels that it would be appropriate, then they can bring that forward for a zoning bylaw amendment or a minor variance to permit the home occupation or home-based business, which then affords the municipality the scrutiny of the situation in that site-specific scenario to see if it is in fact appropriate.
Yeah, I guess through you, Chair, I guess I'm still a little troubled on that one. That seems like a little bit of red tape where it doesn't need to be. I mean, if I was a home-based, tour or travel operator, and there just happened to be a commercial cannabis production on my property, like that, I have to go through hoops in order to make that happen. Like, I don't know, is there a softer approach to that one, or is there some sort of guidelines on kind of what would be inappropriate in terms of a home-based business? Because I'm having a hard time seeing that one, to be honest with you.
Okay, well, that is something that we can go back and look at. But again, any cannabis operations, there are sensitive separation distances from sensitive land uses, and any sort of tourist operation that's going to involve overnight accommodation is generally in most other municipalities deemed incompatible. I mean, we can look at that again, but there is that whole sensitive land use side of things that's being weighed in on.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, just to be, to clarify, I mean, I don't have a problem with the bed and breakfast establishment or the, the agritourism component of it. It's more that specifically that home-based business, which is kind of the way our world is working today.
We can look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Huntley, just for clarification, are you more concerned, if I understand you correctly, you're not suggesting the production or the growing, it's more the administrative side that we shouldn't be regulating? In other words, like, you're running payroll for a cannabis company in your house as a small business, or you mean the actual growing operations or production side of it in a bed and breakfast? I'm not clear on this. It might help Allison. That's
Through you then, Chair. No, I'm talking about, if there's a home-based business, so that would imply that there's a home on the same property. I mean, the cannabis business can be contained and running all within its own facilities, but this is prohibiting, the occupant of the house from having a diverse profession per se, potentially being, an online tour operator or a service desk responder, but this would prohibit them from being that, but without going for special permission. So that's where I'm drawing the line. Right? It's totally independent of the cannabis operation, but you've just, you've shut down what somebody can do as a home-based business in their own home.
gotcha. Does that help, Allison? Sorry, just for clarification, because I know you're going to try and come back with something.
No, it does. My
Okay.
understanding of the question was that it was an unrelated home-based business, and it sounds like that is the case.
Correct.
Okay. Very good. Excellent. Any other questions for Allison before we go to John's report? Okay, seeing none. Then we will move along then to Mr. Conley. Go ahead, John.
So through your worship, the rest of the council, what you have before you is planning report 2021-67, regulating cannabis in the township of Cavan-Monaghan. There are two recommendations, and actually we're going to add a third one. The current two before you is that council review and consider all public and agency verbal and written comments received regarding these applications. Number two, that proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and site plan control amendments be presented to council at a future date for consideration. The third, which we'd be looking for council to endorse as well, is that you'll see at the last page, it would be page 26 of the agenda, but page 4 of the report, is that at the time of writing the report, we've received a range of comments, and those comments are everywhere from no comment to an expressed desire to make presentation and speak to the matter, which will happen later on today. But based on this, and the other part is that when the public notice was put in the Millbrook Times, that was 20 days statutory. The administrative error, which is all mine, that notice didn't go out to public agencies and bodies within that 20-day time frame. So with that, we're looking to hold a second meeting. That would be January 17th. That would be the first council meeting in the new year, in order to have a second public meeting. And that would not only from an administrative and statutory standpoint respect what's required under the Planning Act, but also given the kind of comments we have and the interests in this particular subject, that would give that opportunity to happen. So with that, I would look to council to endorse that third part.
Excellent. Very good. Any questions from members of council before we move on to the public? Nothing further. Okay. The next item is questions and comments from members of the public. Madam Clerk, we have attendees, some of which may wish to speak to today's item. Do you want to let them in and then we'll announce them? I'm not sure what your order is. There's several.
There are quite a few, Mayor McFadden. So I would suggest that if they'd like to speak during this, that they raise their hands. I know some people are delegations for later on in our meeting. So I don't know who is in the audience under attendees that would like to participate in the public meeting.
Okay, we have a hand up from Nancy Jack.
So I will
Clerk.
promote her. Through you, Mayor McFadden, Nancy has joined us.
Very good. Welcome, Nancy. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here on behalf of a newly forming group in the township called Cavan-Monaghan Future Watch. We're a ratepayers and residents association. We're in the process of organization, and I would like to, this has sort of come down the pipes rather quickly at us, so and we've decided that to take a position on it. Our group is not concerned with the growth of cannabis in the township. We think that that's a really important income stream for agricultural people in our township. And we understand that there may be some adverse issues, but we think that they can probably be dealt with with the with the site plan controls and other regulatory and other means. But what we're very, very concerned about is cannabis production anywhere in the township. And I know that there's the recommendation is that it seems that the cannabis production that's contemplated be moved to the rural and agricultural zones. But we don't believe that it belongs anywhere in the township. And the reason is, the main reason is the nuisance that's created by cannabis production and the skunk-like smell. I had the good fortune of living for a while in East City, Peterborough, which was close to the Quaker plant. And what we would often experience is that you could smell for kilometers away what was going on at the Quaker plant. Sometimes we would be bathed in smells of maple and sometimes sugar and sometimes harvest crunch. And people claimed, long-term residents would claim that they could tell what Quaker was making by the smell. Anybody who recognizes how smell carries would know that if instead what you were bathed with was the smell of 10,000 skunks, the experience of living there would be very different. And that's our concern with cannabis production. Cannabis production is a fairly new land use because obviously it's only been legal for a fairly short number of years, and it's only very recently that it's been expanded. Cannabis production has been expanded beyond medical use, but the effects of a cannabis production facility are very well documented nonetheless. I did a short literature search, and I really urge councillors and planners to do the same thing I did. Look at the newspaper articles from all reputable sources in the province, in the country, and across the border, to see what's going on in terms of even the medical cannabis production facilities and what impacts it's causing to neighbors. It's clear that whether you're in the town site or the country, whoever is within any sort of radius of these facilities is going to be unable to use and enjoy their land. Even though these are indoor facilities, the biggest problem that happens is when they are vented, and particularly in the hot weather. People describe them, here are two quotes that I've picked up. One is the skunk smell that permeates everywhere. That's from somebody at a township nearby. This is another part of the province. Somebody in a newspaper article described it as the obnoxious odor that takes your breath away, that you can taste on your lips and burns your eyes and penetrates your home, that makes you ill and gives you sleepless nights and can even make you vacate your home, is unacceptable. Somebody else talked about how they were unable to use their swimming pool at a distance of 5 kilometers away from a production facility because the odor was so strong outside. It's not just residents that have expressed this concern. The cannabis industry itself talks about the impacts and the problem they're having with land use conflict and compatibility. And again, that's readily, really readily findable if you take a look at what the cannabis associations are saying about land use conflict, complaints, and particularly odors. The Ontario Planners Association recently published a blog, and this is what they said about cannabis production. Can you imagine living next to 10,000 skunks? For some Ontario residents, this is their new reality. So we're talking about almost a universally negative experience with cannabis production that people have encountered across the province, across the country, and across the border. We know that not only is it going to be a burden for whatever residents live nearby, but as we try to evolve as a township and really emphasize not just our agricultural heritage, but also our recreational and tourism capacity and try to develop that, having an overriding skunk smell will undermine a lot of those other economic initiatives, and it will make commercial enterprises nearby less attractive. It's interesting. Given the context and the odors, Councillor Huntley, it was interesting sitting here thinking, just imagining what a bed and breakfast would be like next to one of these facilities. I think for good reason, they're regarded as incompatible. Not only will the odors from a cannabis facility affect people who live here, enforcement of the bylaws is going to be a headache for town council. Some of the other townships in the province have talked about having to buy monitoring equipment, sensitive monitoring equipment for thousands of dollars, so that they can measure the odors from facilities. And a lot of Simcoe County has recently had to seek assistance from the federal government on nuisance mitigation because it was unable to control the impacts from the cannabis facilities within their midst. To see, to get a kind of an idea of what other municipalities in the province are struggling with, who have already experienced some cannabis production facilities, numerous ones have passed interim control bylaws to try to address the fact that they've opened the gate to these and to try to limit the impacts of the existing ones while controlling new ones. Here's just a partial list of municipalities that have felt the need to pass interim control bylaws while they pause the approval of any additional facilities. Norfolk, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Pelham, Waynfleet, Welland, Port Colborne, Thorold, St. Catharines, Orillia, Essa, New Tecumseh, Clearview, Fort Erie, Creemore, Cobourg, Trent Hills, East Gwillimbury, Port Hope, Brock, and Scugog. If everybody's experiencing negative impacts and trying to close the gate, it's inconceivable. It's just really hard to understand why we're at the same time trying to make it easier for production to happen in our township. I urge you, before you consider opening the doors to production facilities in Cavan, Monaghan, to try to connect with some of these other municipalities and try to find any one that has decided that it was worthwhile having them in their facility, in their midst. And with that, I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Jack. And right on time as well. You're just under a minute to go on your 10-minute delegation, so thank you. My apologies right off the bat. I should have asked you for your address. I know you put it on the on your submission, but I need to ask it for the clerk's purposes.
Am I gone? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're still here.
Oh, I popped leave webinar. So I live at 19 Ann Street in Millbrook, Townside.
Very good. Perfect. From members of council, any questions for Ms. Jack? None at this moment. Councillor Huntley, go ahead.
Just a clarification. I was definitely not trying to promote bed and breakfasts on cannabis facility sites. I was actually saying that I agree that one shouldn't be there.
It would be an interesting experience anyway to stay in a bed and breakfast. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? Seeing none. Okay, very good. Thank you, Ms. Jack. And with that, Madam Clerk, I will look to the attendees to see any other hands going up. There's lots of attendees, so that's good to see. There's a lot of interest in today's agenda, but I do not see any hands. I'll give another 30 seconds just in case anybody is having technical difficulty with trying to raise a hand. Oh, I see one. Mr. Steele, go. Al Steele is the next one. Madam Clerk, can you let Mr. Steele in? And I will start by asking for his address.
Mayor McFadden, Al has joined us.
Very good. Welcome, Mr. Steele. Mr. Steele, could you, for the clerk, provide your address?
Just on muting. Thank you. 1622 Tapley Quarter Line.
Very good. Welcome. We can now see and hear you. So the floor is yours for 10 minutes, Mr. Steele. Go ahead.
Thank you. It'll be a very quick one. I'm actually speaking on what was presented by the consultant, and think that there are definitely a lot of broad or very specific guidelines for it. I also speak as somebody that does understand this side fairly well. My daughter, who is ISO certified, was recruited to take care of two major grow ops in the Toronto and north of Toronto area. And she was there for approximately 6 years until recruited by a public organization for a bigger portfolio. But during that time, she ended up leading one of the facilities in Toronto into ISO certification and was in the process of finishing ISO certification for the one in the north area. As somebody that has visited the facility from both the outside and the lobby area, I can tell you that there were never any adverse odors coming from the area. And as far as its discreetness, you couldn't tell it from any of the other industrial buildings that were in the area. Over the period that she did work there, that we talked quite a bit about the whole issue of environmental controls and so on. And that the facility itself had very stringent monitoring capabilities. And what I see and what was recommended by the consultants, that's being adhered in all the township's thoughts at this point. I believe that responsible, and I have to say that responsible commercial operations, they owe a responsibility to the community, but also are regulated not only by the local, but by provincial and by federal authorities. I think that what was presented by the consultant today is a very strong enforcement, and if it adhered to in its development of the facilities, that I think that it goes a long way. Anyways, that's one person's opinion, and I do invite council to actually visit some of these facilities and get the feedback from the owners themselves of what they have had to go through and what they need to meet on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Steele. Any questions from members of council for Mr. Steele? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Steele. We will move on to the next individual looking to speak, and I have an Isabella Fabellini. Madam Clerk, if you could admit Isabella and move Mr. Steele out.
Mayor McFadden, that has occurred, and Isabella's with us, and Mr. Steele is back as an attendee.
Very good. Welcome, Ms. Fabellini. If you could provide your address for the clerk.
Through Mayor McFadden, I've just sent Isabella a request to turn on her.
Oh,
there we
sorry.
go. That's all right.
Hi, Cindy. Okay.
We can hear you, but we can't see you. We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Can you
Okay.
can you see me? Hang on. Can you see me now?
Not yet. Okay. It's gray.
It's great. You can't see me?
No, it's not black. So your video is turned on, but have you got something in front of your camera?
Ah, bon. Oui. Sorry. Hello.
Okay, now it's back to your name, so you've got your camera off.
Okay. Oh dear. I am so sorry. Hang on. I got what's going on here? Calls notification. It just changed my screen. Hang on a second. Sorry.
No
I
problem.
apologize.
I can assure you we won't be using this against your 10 minutes of your delegation.
Oh,
So not
okay, so the host has asked you to start your video. Okay, we got it. Are we good?
very good. Madam Clerk, sorry, did we get the address for Ms. Fabellini?
No, I
It's
just need it.
it's Isabella Fabelli, 39
Fabellini, okay.
39 Fern Ridge Heights. And I'd like to make a comment to Mr. Steelers still, and I disagree with the, I understand what you're saying to be accurate as you understand it, as your daughter has experienced or relayed it to you. But I agree with Miss Nancy Jack that it's the overwhelming odors. There's substantial testimony and proof regarding it. I grew up in the Niagara region. They are dealing with issue upon issue, Pelham, Weldon, she named a whole slew of them. I am not opposed to the, as she mentioned, Nancy, the production, the growing, the cultivation of it with restrictions, but I am opposed to it, the production, the pot plant, for the very reason she said. You cannot get away from it. The smell is horrific. This is a place where we come to live, to grow as a school teacher, as an educator. And I understand that pot is legalized and that parents can do what they will in their home, but I see the effects it has on children. And that's a whole other issue. So I think that my concern is, Nancy very succinctly and eloquently stated it. So I disagree with what Mr. Still said. And I think we need to think about the people and the residents who live here, not the people who go and check and monitor if it meets safety requirements or whatever metrics that they use. That's it. Not very eloquently put. Can you hear me?
No, we
Yes.
can hear you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Isabella. Any questions from members of council? Seeing none. Thank you, Isabella.
Thank you.
And we will look to the attendees if anybody else wishes to raise their hand. Now we'll give it a little bit longer because it's technology, and if anybody is struggling to try and figure out how to raise their hand, we'll take our time. Okay, I don't see any more. So I'll just remind those watching, as well as council, that we will have a second opportunity for a public meeting, and it will be on January 17th on this specific topic. So we are not making a decision today on this, but we will certainly be holding another public meeting on this with this report, and on January 17th for consideration. I guess one question, basically the theme of today's comments thus far that I've heard revolves around some of the odors. And I'm wondering if our consultant, Allison, if you could maybe address some of those concerns based on some of your previous, we have a question from, so we have Isabella, and I don't know whether she just put up her hand. She didn't use up her 10 minutes, so she's certainly welcome to speak. Madam Clerk, can you let Isabella back in?
Mayor McFadden, yes, I can. Just give me one moment. Isabella has joined us again.
Go ahead, Isabel.
Mayor McFadden, I've just sent Isabella.
There we go. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was spieling away and I didn't see it. In addition, thank you, Your Worship. In addition to the odors being a primary concern, there's also other negative impacts. And we heard, was it Nick McDonald who spoke back in December regarding this? And he also used Pelham as one of the examples, but there are a myriad of examples. Traffic issues, lights, the water, wastewater management. We already have an issue at present with the, the residential growth that's just exploded, and having to contend with the water management and who's paying and how much we're paying for that, let alone this as well. So that's something else to take into consideration regarding not approving a cannabis production facility in our township. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Isabella. Okay. Mr. Steele also did not use up his 10 minutes, has his hand up, and he would like to provide further comment. It's not in the form of a debate, so just we're providing council with information. So it's certainly not an opportunity to debate amongst those that are wishing to speak. But Mr. Steele, you can, Madam Clerk, if you could let Mr. Steele in, he still had some time remaining, and I certainly welcome the input, but just a reminder, we're not about to open up a debate amongst those that are speaking, but you're certainly welcome to offer new information. Go ahead. Welcome back, Mr. Steele. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, and not to debate, but I think that one of the things that is being forgotten is this is part of the discussion about the bylaw and the regulations that are talked about. The whole issue of design of a building is what this is, that the bylaws are being addressed. And it's through that consultation that state-of-the-art technology, scrubbers on affluent that's leaving a building, is what is at discussion here. As applicants come through, they have to have a fully vetted plan to be able to come into play, as well as having licenses from most levels or all levels of government in order to carry on. I think that it behooves the township, if what has happened in the past, and some of those facilities that have happened in the past have been negligent and haven't been properly enforced. I think that the basis of what was presented today is a very strong deterrent from the fly-by-nighters of getting into the township. Thank you very much for the recomment.
Absolutely. Thanks here, Mr. Steele. I will open it up because there is still quite a few attendees, just in case you're still struggling. But at any point, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, I am going to move along to council so we can move into council discussion. Okay, back to Allison. If you could just maybe speak to some of those issues, speak to potentially early adopters that may not necessarily have had the necessary legislative framework in place with regards to official planning and zoning. In other words, the key things that we're trying to address here, because as it stands right now, it is a permitted use and it's pretty open. We don't have any of these restrictions. So it's of no means that we're suggesting that council is trying to open this up for the Wild West. I think it's more of the opposite. We're actually trying to regulate specifically the use that's already in our official plan and how we would move forward, and taking into consideration lessons learned not only from across Ontario, but we know even within Peterborough County of other jurisdictions that have been dealing with some of these matters, and we certainly don't want to end up where other jurisdictions have. So maybe just some highlights on that. I know you've got a lot of experience relative to other municipalities across Ontario, and what's being done to address those specific concerns that have been raised today.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're quite right. What you have in front of you is a strengthening of the current regulations for cannabis within the township. And what we're doing with these planning documents is really essentially building on some of the best practices that we've seen in other municipalities and putting in place a system of checks and balances. So a few things that I would highlight is that cannabis production is only, or is proposed that it would only be permitted by way of a zoning bylaw amendment. So that doesn't mean that it's permitted as of right. It means that only after somebody comes forward with an application, only after they've submitted all of the requisite studies that we are requiring, and only once we have given due assessment and evaluation, do we then make any kind of decision as to whether or not it is appropriate. But a lot of the regulations that are also embedded within the documents are to allow for a response to any adverse impacts or to allow for any impacts generally that may occur from a site-specific situation. So there is specifically a policy in the official plan, for example, that says that although we have a minimum 300-meter separation distance, if in a site-specific situation, after the studies are done, the odor management study is done, all of the environmental studies are done, it is deemed that a greater distance is required, then the OP policy provides that something greater than 300 meters in that situation can be applied. So we have, on one hand, tried to give the township and council tools to address all of the various impacts and required a number of studies, but we've also given the ability to adjust within those site-specific situations where issues such as water consumption, waste management, all of those concern stormwater, they must be addressed to the satisfaction of the township. So I think that is also worth underlining, that the studies that are submitted and the resolutions that are brought forward out of those studies must be to the satisfaction of the township. Does that assist at all in
I think that's pretty good. With regards to other items that were raised were traffic, light, and the use of water and wastewater specifically.
Right. So in terms of light, in both the OP and the zoning bylaw, we are requiring that any lighting associated with cannabis production facilities respects the dark sky principle. So lighting must be pointed downward. And in particular, this will come forward in site plan, because again, in site plan, that is when you get down to the real nitty gritty on a site specific level in terms of where is the external lighting, how is it arranged on the lot, that can be addressed. In terms of water, yes, cannabis is a high water user. And in terms of the quality of water that they need to grow cannabis, they do need a very high quality of water that's required by their federal licensing. And also in terms of the effluent that has to be treated. So in terms of the quantities of water, if something is proposed to be out in the rural area, we're requiring a hydrogeological study to look at water quantity. And if it's within the urban area, we are requiring a servicing study to ensure that the municipal services can handle the water demands of the use, as well as the post effluent. So that's your stormwater management. So all of those requirements have been addressed up front in terms of the studies and the recommendations that are required. And those studies would have to be undertaken by qualified engineers, qualified personnel who can do those studies.
Very good. Any other questions from members of council or issues to raise with our consultant? Councillor Huntley, go ahead.
Through you, Chair, and yeah, I do agree that these things that we've put in place are tightening up versus loosening up, and we're not kind of, this wouldn't be opening it up to the Wild West, as you said. But I guess I do have a question around, in the development criteria, there's, to mitigate the adverse effects of noise, odor, dust, and light, which you've kind of touched on. But is there, how is that tangible? How do you what is mitigate odor? How do we know if odor's been mitigated before it's even put into production? So is there a set of criteria, or is there some sort of, tools or design that needs to be in place to make that happen? How do you get it out of, kind of a quantitative into a qualitative kind of measure?
There are. So it's, as you say, there's two parts to that. Number one is there are a number of technologies that treat effluent, the air effluent that I'm talking about, and the odor. And that is also tied to their federal licensing for cannabis operators. So they do have certain targets that they need to operate within, and the municipality can always require greater. There is the scientific measure of odor. I'm not a scientist, so I'm not the best to speak to that technical side of it. But again, we are requiring that with any zoning bylaw amendment application that comes forward, there must be an odor study undertaken by a qualified engineer, and that the results of that study must evolve into an odor management plan that the cannabis operation would then have to adhere to in their day-to-day operations. So again, that would, the scientific and engineering side of that would be dealt by the appropriate engineer that would do that study. And there are engineers out there that do that.
And I through you, Chair, then I
Go
think
ahead.
you also have said that it also allows us the provision of if they're not meeting what we find acceptable, or then they have to go back and take corrective action as well. Right? Like, so it's not a one-shot deal. If they get it wrong, then too bad, we had our chance.
So there's actually two parts to that. So the first is that the studies that they do and the recommendations that they come forward with must be to the satisfaction of the township. So that is in terms of the recommended mitigative measures. The township has to be accepting of those. If they are in operation and they are not operating, or they're not compliant with either their federal license or with the zoning regulations that are in place, then at that point you're into an enforcement situation. And it is my understanding that there is subsequent consequences or stringent consequences for somebody who does not adhere to their federal license. That is something that is fairly punitive at a federal level. That's my understanding.
Sorry, just to clarify then, Chair. I think where we were going with that one was, yes, they've hit the criteria, so they're doing what they're supposed to do, but is there an opportunity as a municipality to go back and say, you're hitting it, but it's really not satisfying what we were expecting? Like, on paper, it looked good, but now we're experiencing it and it's not so good.
So again, there's two sides to that.
Yeah.
So there is the federal licensing requirements that does address odor and air treatment control. And if they are within that framework, then the municipality would not be able to do anything in terms of the license. If they have now received approval through a zoning bylaw amendment process, and they are in all ways legal, and they are operating in conjunction with the odor management plan that's in place, then at that point, they are a legal use in their operation.
Okay, Councillor Huntley?
So
In other words,
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
through you, Chair. So then it sounds like, once they've established and they're out of the gate and they're running, we don't have a lot of recourse to come back and make changes later. Like, it's once they're set up and running, they're running, as long as they don't fall outside of their riverbanks.
Correct.
We don't get to move the riverbanks later. Gotcha.
Not once they've satisfied that planning process. Once they've gone through that amendment process and they have received what they need to regulate them, then yes, at that point they're conforming with their zoning.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, just for clarification on that as well then, so I know they've got their federal standards that they must they must follow relative to smell, but there can't be anything within our zoning then, if I understand. For example, it's pretty simple. The neighbors will not smell the cannabis. I mean, it's not a matter of how much or whatnot, but is that possible within the zoning, or they just literally need, as far as smell, they just have to comply with the federal guidelines or federal requirements?
No, so as part of the zoning bylaw amendment process, we're requiring an odor management study and an odor management plan. So once they have submitted that and they have been granted that zoning bylaw amendment, and because those studies have been to the satisfaction of the township, and as long as they are operating within that odor management plan, then they have zoning permission to exist. If for some reason they weren't, then that would be a zoning enforcement issue.
Yeah, I guess I'm struggling with that interpretation, because I think that they can submit whatever plan they want and they can write it and it sounds all great, but in actuality, then all of a sudden it appears, and to Councillor Huntley's point, it looked really good on paper, but if the neighbor smells it or the neighborhood smells it, that becomes a problem. So can it be something as simple as your smell mitigation plan or requirement is such that the neighbors don't smell it? I don't see that as being unreasonable, but I would expect that would be what the plan is. So therefore, if you're at the neighbors and it smells, then you haven't met the requirements of your plan. Is that possible? Or it's new to all of us, so we're trying to understand it.
Yeah, so the odor management plan would have certain performance criteria included within that. Again, that would be something that would be prepared by an appropriate engineer. So it wouldn't simply be as simple as we can smell it or we can't smell it.
Okay, all right. Okay, as I indicated earlier, we're not making a decision today. There will be a second public meeting on January 17th. So, Madam Clerk, and without any further ado, I'm going to bring forward a motion just to close the public meeting for today, unless, Madam Clerk, I've missed any items.
Through you, Mayor McFadden, under section 7.6, 7.7, because we had to switch them around there.
Yep.
I think we should do the consideration of the report and support Mr. Conley's recommendations, which were to review and consider the comments, the proposed official plan be brought back at a future meeting or a future date. A perfect, Carly's got it in front of us. And then the third motion, or the third motion was to that council support holding a second meeting on January 17th, 2022.
Okay, very good. So inside the public meeting, not a problem. Motion then from council to.
It sounded like the clerk just made the motion, but I'll.
That's exactly it.
One and
So it's item 1, 2, and 3. Number 3, as the clerk just indicated, which will clearly identify that we're going to have a meeting on January 17th for a second public meeting on the topic. Mr. Conley, you've just came on board. Does that sound reasonable? Is that what you were expecting?
I certainly wasn't going to move it, Your Worship, but I was just making sure that I'm here and available if there are any questions or clarification. Excellent. But I think to point out again that the public meeting on the 17th would also be, there wouldn't be a decision made. There would be comments, written and verbal, that would be taken into consideration, and that would all be part of the public record. Effectively, a matrix brought forward for comments made to date, not just today, but also written comments that will be brought forward with the report to council for it to make its decision.
Excellent. In other words, a meeting very similar to today's, where the outcome would be that it would come forward at a future date with a report.
Correct, Your Worship.
Expecting a decision. Okay, very good. Excellent. So we had a mover of Councillor Huntley and a seconder of Councillor Belch on recommendation items 1 and 2, and a third one added as per the clerk, which would clearly articulate that we are going to have an additional public meeting held as part of our regular council meeting on January 17th. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
and Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. Okay, moving, councillors, do you need a break or shall we continue?
Through you, Mayor McFadden, we just need to close the public meeting now prior to your break.
We do. Motion to close the public meeting. Councillor Huntley and Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
and Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Back to my earlier question, does council need a break or shall we continue with the delegations?
Good to go.
Good
Yeah.
to go, Councillor Belch. All right, we will continue on. And to there won't be any staff on these ones, so they can freely leave if they need to. Okay, moving along, delegations 8.1, Crystal Damon, Executive Vice President, Marketing and Corporate Communications from the Kawartha Credit Union, Community Survey regarding the Mobile Solutions Center. Welcome, Crystal.
Mayor McFadden, Crystal has joined us. I've just sent her a notice. There we go.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor McFadden and members of council for the opportunity to present to you today. You will recall that I attended the meeting about a year ago to explain our plan for possibly surveying the residents of Cavan Monaghan Township regarding our Mobile Solutions Center. And today I'd like to present to you the results of that survey. So in August 2021, we conducted a survey to gauge the interest of the Cavan Monaghan community in using our mobile center. We call it the MSC, Mobile Solutions Center. You can actually go to the next slide, please, Cindy. Thank you. The survey was available to the townships on the township's website for a 2-month period, and the surveys were conducted in person at the Millbrook Arena from August 23rd to 27th. The MSC was also on site for the event, and signage was placed around the town to let residents know it was there. Kawartha employees visited local businesses to collect survey responses, and 50 surveys were dropped off at the local retirement residence. In advance of the survey being available to the community, 5,000 direct mail pieces were distributed to residents, inviting them to participate in the online survey. 35 surveys were completed in total, and the results are as follows. Next slide, please. The survey was comprised of 7 or 8 questions, the first of which was, do you require personal or business financial services? You can see the results here. Of the 8.5% of residents who indicated that they would need business services, most indicated later in the survey, either verbally or through their comments, that they would never use them. Businesses that we surveyed in person did not express interest in using the MSC as they were happy with their current banking arrangements. We heard from many of the businesses and residents that during this lag time between when the bank left the community and today, they've already made other arrangements for their financial services, and you'll see in the rest of their survey results that that feeling is expressed again and again. Next slide, please. When asked where they currently do their everyday banking, 30% said TD, Scotiabank 14%, and Kawartha at 2.34. When asked how often they visit their bank or credit union, 28.5% basically said once every 2 weeks, 26% said once per week, and so on. Next slide, please. The next question asked detailed information about the types of products and services that they would require and how often. And there is an eye chart, literally an eye chart that follows that gives you all the details and percentages. But the strongest interest was shown in day-to-day banking services such as personal checking and savings accounts, lending, check deposits, withdrawals, and cashing. Online banking, cash, and ATM services were also indicated as being needed. And the frequency that these services would be required was varied over different groups. Business services, wire transfers, and foreign currency were rarely indicated as being needed. Next slide, please, Sydney. This is the eye chart that I was referring to. You can peruse this at your leisure. It gives you a little bit more detail about the types of services people require and how often, bearing in mind that our sample size was 35 residents. Next slide, please, Cynthia. We asked if Kawartha's Mobile Solutions Center was available to the community. Would you be interested in becoming a member and using its services? 37% said yes, 11.5% maybe, and almost 14.5% said no. Interestingly, 28.6% are already members or indicated that they were. When we asked if you were interested in becoming a member and using the MSC, when would that be? 40% said immediately, and 22.5% said less than 12 months, and so on. When we asked the question, what would it take for you to make the switch to Kawartha Credit Union? 17 of the respondents skipped the question entirely, and 3 submitted verbatim responses, which were, you'd need to have an easy switch service so that the arrangements I've already made with my financial institution could be converted over to Kawartha. Better rates, and I have no intention of changing banks. Question number 7 was, if you were already a Kawartha Credit Union member, would you consider using the services of the MSC? 40% said yes, no said 3%, and maybe said 17%, which is a little bit different from the question we asked earlier on. And the next slide, question 9, understanding that the Mobile Solutions Center does not carry cash except in the ATM, how often would you require it to be available to the community? Over 48% indicated that they would like it to be available once per week, 14% said every other week, and 17% indicated once per month. So overall, based on the very low response rate and the hesitation expressed about the services that the Mobile Solutions Center could provide to Cavan Monaghan, and these were comments like discomfort with the idea of money being put in the ATM and then driving down the road. So people's money literally driving away. Many were concerned about the security of the MSC. They didn't like the small offices inside. They felt it was not private enough, or maybe even not secure enough. So in interviewing people to complete these surveys, we did get a lot of information that was outside of the formal questionnaire. And just the feeling that, especially among the businesses, they've already made their transition to another financial institution, and they're really not they really have no appetite for starting that process over again. They were concerned, the businesses were mostly concerned that we didn't have a night deposit available in the Mobile Solutions Center, and that's something that they would need, as well as coin. So all in all, we've made the decision not to pursue the opportunity in Cavan Monaghan based on these reasons. We just feel that there wasn't really an appetite for the MSC at this time. So what we've done is we've sort of pivoted in our strategic direction. We've had some success recently in using the MSC for recruiting employees in this very difficult job market. We've been using it in Kingston and Peterborough to try and encourage people to work with us. Also at fairs and colleges and universities in the spring, COVID permitting, and for financial literacy efforts at our local high schools across our branch territory. So based on that, we would, however, like to explore the opportunity of discussing a bricks and mortar presence in Cavan Monaghan at the new commercial site on County Road 10 at such time as that is appropriate. Next slide, please. So I do thank Cavan Monaghan Council Mayor for the opportunity to conduct the survey recently, and I would ask if you have any questions I might be able to answer today.
Very good. Thank you very much, Crystal. And I do want to thank you. We've been involved, I believe it's been a couple of years now. The pandemic sort of slowed everything down, but it was prior to the pandemic. I know that because we met in person yes. at a round table, and I know our Director of Finance was there with us as well, participating yes. In this opportunity. So thank you. It was certainly appreciated. We got a tour of the mobile banking solution, and I was quite impressed by everything it had to offer in an RV that could roll away. I understand all that, but it was quite phenomenal. The services and the opportunities that were there, completely mobile friendly, accessible, etc. So with that, is there any questions from members of council? Councillor Huntley.
Through your chair, I have no real question. And just, it's unfortunate, I guess the survey, dictates kind of what's the reality, and without going through the survey or giving it a shot, we didn't know. So it's at least we gain the information that we've gained.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I guess just one question with regards to next steps with potential interest in bricks and mortar. Is that something you just wish to meet with staff and further those conversations, or what's the best way to sort of pursue that? Obviously, you don't need council's involvement at this point. That's something right. outside of us, but are you looking for involvement of our staff, or how can we assist you in that endeavor?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to begin that conversation. I don't know. I've looked online to see sort of what the plan is for that space, but I would very much like to engage with your office to discuss, what this site is going to involve and how we might be able to, think about the possibility of having a bricks and mortar presence there.
Excellent. Very good. You're not going to need a motion for that direction. You're welcome to reach out to any staff or member of council at any point. We've certainly enjoyed the opportunity of working with you and look forward to potential opportunities down the road and in the future. If you need any of the staff or any assistance from any member of council, simply reach out and we can certainly help you along the way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Excellent.
Thank you for your time today.
For sure. If there's no other questions then from members of council, I would entertain a motion then to receive that delegation. Oh, Madam Clerk just came online. Madam Clerk, what did I do wrong?
Mayor McFadden, nothing. I was just getting ready for the recorded vote. If I don't click it on, then there's a lot of feedback. So as soon as you go to call that, I turn it on to try to eliminate the feedback. Nope, there's no comments at all. And I don't believe Ms. Pope has any either. She probably would have shown her face as well. So nope, this is great. Thanks.
Very good. Okay. Motion then to receive that delegation. We got Councillor Belch and Councillor Huntley. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Mayor McFadden.
Yes.
And Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Crystal, once again, thank you not only to yourself, but all of the staff that were involved in that pilot project. We really appreciate you bringing that out and the efforts that were involved in coordination. Thank you. Our next delegation is 8.2, Rebecca Ann Berry and Michael Aubie, with regards to the Canada Post and Millbrook growth moving forward together. Madam Clerk, I know you are working to bring them into the meeting.
For you, Mayor McFadden, there's Becky and Michael should be coming. There we go. Through McFadden, they've both joined us.
Very good. Welcome, Rebecca Ann and Michael.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you
Just
so much.
fixing my camera.
Very good. I
Likewise.
noticed your screen name says Becky. Would you prefer I refer to you as Becky?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. And Michael?
Michael is perfect. Thank you so much.
Excellent. All right, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So good afternoon, Mayor McFadden and members of council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. As introduced, my name is Michael Obi. I'm the manager responsible for real estate planning with Canada Post. Canada Post is in a unique position to count every Canadian as a customer. As Canada Post grows and changes with customer needs and expectations, we want to invest in the communities where we're present. Given the essential nature of our business and our history, we require long-term solutions to protect our operations and to ensure that the residents of Cavan Monaghan have the level of service that they've come to expect. As communities expand, it's our responsibility to look strategically at how we can meet the new demand. Now, for Millbrook in particular, we've responded by increasing our staff and our resources. However, the physical building has stayed the same size. Change is necessary to ensure that our operations are safe, efficient, and reliable. As Canada Post looks to potential solutions, we believe it's critical to be a partner with the community, and that's why we're here today. Each community is different. There's no cookie cutter approach. As we've indicated to town staff in previous discussions, Canada Post is looking at a number of options, but we have identified a potential opportunity which we believe would be a natural fit. I'd now like to turn it over to my colleague, Becky Berry, who will speak more to the plan specifically. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Becky Berry. I'm a real estate planning manager with Canada Post as well. Part of my role is to lead the Millbrook project. Thank you so much for the next slide. Thank you, Michael, for the summary. Mayor McFadden and members of council, thank you for having us here today. I recently had the pleasure of visiting Millbrook while at our post office. The downtown is beautiful, and you can see and feel the pride that the residents and local business owners take in the community. As Michael stated, we're excited to see the development in Millbrook. However, as you can appreciate, this puts significant pressure on our existing operations. We've grown to meet the demand. However, the building shell has remained unchanged. It's like having a 2-bedroom house with 10 kids in it. The challenge isn't that we need to hire more. We need a building that meets the growth of today and the expected needs of tomorrow. Many of you will be familiar with the building, but as a reminder, the post office contains a retail location staffed by residents, proudly serving the community. Many of your constituents visit our site daily to pick up their mail and parcel. Additionally, as Michael alluded, we have delivery agents who at this time of year are scrambling to ensure all of your holiday parcels are safely delivered. Next slide, please. Thank you. To solve for growth, we've been actively reviewing potential properties in and around Millbrook. This search has included a new standalone site for our depot, as well as a possible expansion leveraging the neighboring land. While we're still working on the right solution, we believe we've identified a natural opportunity with the adjacent property. However, regardless of the solution, our retail location will remain in Millbrook. Given our needs for residents, we would like to better understand the current state of the neighboring land. We understand a phase 1 and 2 environmental assessment has been conducted. Additionally, we understand from our conversation with town staff that there are arrears or amounts owing on the land. We would be interested in discussing this further. This information would be valuable as we continue to explore the right solution for Millbrook while partnering with the Township of Cavan Monaghan. Customer habits are rapidly changing, as Canada Post is at the forefront of this evolution. We have a dedicated team of employees at 2 King Street West, Millbrook. We want to invest in the community where they live, work, and raise their families. This project will ensure Canada Post can make significant long-term investments into the community and provide excellent service now and in the near future. Mayor McFadden, thank you for providing us the opportunity to speak. And Michael and I will remain available during this council meeting to answer any questions should they arise. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you both. Questions from members of council? Councillor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, to I guess Becky. You said you were looking at alternatives if this isn't possible. Do you, any idea where those alternatives are at this point, or are they still pie in the sky?
Thank you so much for the question. We're still exploring all options. And we're proud to serve the community where we are today. And we have not gone anywhere outside of the radius of the Millbrook, Hutton, Monaghan area.
Very good. Any further questions? It may be somewhat off topic, but certainly of concern is if you were watching our last delegation and the fact that our Village of Millbrook does not have a bank, is there any possibility of the Canada Postal banking solution coming forward, of which our council has been repetitively supportive of, and would certainly be a fantastic home run, all in one location to be able to provide both services? Is there anything moving forward with that?
I'd be happy to answer that. Thank you so much, Mayor McFadden, for that question. I can certainly appreciate, especially having heard the last delegation's presentation, that there's certainly interest on that. I can say that I'm not aware of any specific plans at this time in regards to Millbrook. However, I'd be more than happy to pass that along to my colleagues who are responsible without making any promises to yourself or to council today, but I'd be more than happy to pass along the information in regards to Millbrook.
Very good. Any other questions from members of council? If not, I look for a resolution then to direct staff to formally work with Becky and Michael, our Canada Post in general, to further these discussions, to bring something back in the future to council would be my suggestion of how to bring it forward, unless any other member of council has a different approach. And maybe part of that conversation could be an update on the mobile or the Canada Post banking and where that sits, so that staff is aware of that as well. Council? Councillor Belch?
Let's
good.
Make a motion to
move, Councillor.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Directive to work with staff and provide an update on that, and then bring back a future report. Councillor Hunt, you okay with that to second?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Very good. Excellent. Madam Clerk, we got a motion. Are you okay?
Mayor McFadden, I just want to clarify that bring a report back to council to also include Canada Post banking, like an update on Canada Post banking. That was the other line you just said.
Yeah, I would. I'm certain that they can reach out to their colleagues to find a sort of an update on. I know it's something that council's been very passionate about in the past, and as both Becky and Michael just heard, we are now without a bank, and it's certainly something that's very of the significant interest to councils via our past resolutions. It'd be great to have an update on rural banking, because that seems to be the sector of the municipalities that are losing their banks but still having Canada Post. And in light of the opportunity before us with an overall expansion of the potential site, it might be something that could work well, but I don't know the update, and I'm sure Michael and Becky will provide that to staff that can come back as part of the report.
Wonderful.
And I didn't mean for all that to go into the motion, but that was the intent.
Perfect.
Very good. All right, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Mayor McFadden?
Yes.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
And Councillor Belch?
Yes.
Motion is approved. Michael, Becky, thank you very much, and our staff will be in touch to continue those discussions.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Council, all right to continue? Do you need a break before we enter into the final delegation?
Yeah, okay.
Go.
Okay, Council's good. All right, we will move along then to our next item. I will need a motion to add Graham Whitelaw as one of the speakers specifically to this delegation. If I can get that motion. We got Councillor Belch, Councillor Huntley, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch?
Yes.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
And Mayor McFadden?
Yes, motion is approved. Next delegation, item 8.3 is John Kinter from Kawartha Land Trust and Baxter Creek Watershed Alliance, along with Graham Whitelaw and Community Conservation Vision for Millbrook Jail Land. I'll wait till you've brought both of them in.
John is with us, and Graham should, there we go. Through McFadden, they're both with us.
All right, welcome John and Graham. Go ahead, I don't know who wishes to start, but the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council, for allowing Graham to join me today as well. I neglected to include his name on my initial request, so that's my mistake, and I appreciate you accommodating. If we could go to page 103, which is the first slide in our presentation deck, I think it's page 103 of the Council agenda, that would be wonderful. You can keep going on. I think it's all the way to 103. It's the end of this vision document, and it starts with a slide titled Community Conservation Vision for Millbrook Jail Lands. Perfect. Thank you very much. So yeah, my name is John Quintero, and I'm the Executive Director at the Kawartha Land Trust. And I'm joined here today by Graham Whitelaw, representing Baxter Creek Watershed Alliance, to speak to Council about a property that I know is very near and dear to the hearts of many, the former Millbrook jail lands, and a vision and a plan that we're coming up with for this property that we wanted to speak to Council about and enlist your help and support in moving forward with. If you could go to the next slide, please. So Kawartha Land Trust and Baxter Creek Watershed Alliance have formed this partnership, and the goal is to conserve the ecologically significant areas on the property known as the old Millbrook jail lands. We recognize that there are lots of different potential uses for this property, and this is a unique and interesting opportunity for Kawartha Land Trust, which is primarily an ecological conservation organization, to partner with a community group who's interested in seeing a wide variety of possibilities of how this site is used and how it can benefit the community of Millbrook. Next slide, please. For those of you who aren't familiar with Kawartha Land Trust, we are a federally incorporated nonprofit charity who operates here in the Kawarthas in the city, Peterborough County and city of Kawartha Lakes area generally. Since over the last 20 years, we've protected over 26 properties and over 5,000 acres of land. We also manage an additional 600-acre property for Parks Canada Trent Severn Waterway to help them care for that land and make it available for public use and access. Our recently renewed mission was to care for lands entrusted to us and help other people protect the land that they love in the Kawarthas. And we do that in a number of different ways. Obviously, first and foremost is that we protect ecologically important land, connections and corridors in the natural heritage system. And that protection is legally binding, it is internationally recognized, and it does leave some room for land use, but it's primarily in place to protect the ecological values. Recently, we've also started helping landowners to be better stewards of their land through our Partners in Conservation program, in which we recruit owners of ecologically important land and help them learn more about it and how that they can become better stewards. We also aim to provide public access to nature and connect people back with the nature that nourishes them through our trails and through stewardship agreements with various partner organizations. And of course, we're always looking for collaborative solutions to conservation, and we look to collaborate with governments, with community groups, with individuals, and with all others who are interested in conservation in the Kawarthas. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor McFadden and Council for adding me to this delegation. My name is Graham Whitelaw, and I live at 29 Brookside in Millbrook. I'm a volunteer with the Baxter Creek Watershed Alliance, and I also teach environmental studies and planning at Queen's University. So this is the first public presentation of the Baxter Creek Watershed Alliance. We wanted to share with you a little bit about our organization. So our vision is of community members, including residents and decision makers, working together to move sustainability forward in the Baxter Creek watershed. We're dedicated to preserving and enhancing the sustainability of the watershed. And to that end, we recently federally incorporated our not-for-profit that's led by volunteer directors, as well as a steering committee. And it's the steering committee of local residents that I'm a part of, and we're currently growing our membership. Next slide, please. So our strategy really focuses around partnerships and collaboration. So to work with municipalities, conservation organizations, and other partners toward the overall vision that I was talking about for the watershed. And that's why we're here today. We promote land protection and stewardship efforts on both private and public lands. And we do this through citizen science, environmental monitoring, research, and public commentary on policies that might affect the watershed. So our goals really focus in two areas. The first is on natural spaces, so streams, springs, seeps, water bodies, wetlands, and the watershed itself for flora and fauna, as well as the development of trails for access through passive recreation and use. And we want to be a constructive and consultative voice in all of the activities that we participate in. Next slide. Our focus is really on sound science so that we can contribute to integrated watershed management. And we do this through environmental monitoring to contribute to the baseline that's already available for Baxter Creek to support decision-making. And we're also about community access to and education of a protected natural heritage system for Baxter Creek watershed. From a policy perspective, we comment on land use plans and decisions and aim to support activities that will promote sustainability. We're really focused on the watershed, but because of tiering and conformity and such, we also will be working with provincial government, regional bodies, and other municipalities who might be bringing in natural heritage system policies that might affect the watershed. Next slide. I just wanted to finish with these two ideas and our broad vision. So the Alliance supports the vision of an integrated passive trail network through a protected natural heritage system. And we're also working to encourage land stewardship on both public and private lands. Next slide, and over to you, John.
Thanks, Graham. So we're here today to talk about this partnership and also to invite the municipality to join us in this partnership. So the Baxter Creek Watershed Alliance and this group of concerned citizens came and approached Kawartha Land Trust and our board, asking if we'd be willing to partner in this unique opportunity. And the vision for this particular property is outlined here, although obviously it's subject to change based on the needs of the community and what we find when we start getting into this work. But ideally, a separate community organization will own the property and look after its management. That organization will take the lead in fundraising as the future owner of the problem, but with support from Kawartha Land Trust to help with that fundraising effort to purchase the property from Infrastructure Ontario. Kawartha Land Trust will register and hold a conservation easement agreement on the property, which is registered on title and protects the natural heritage aspects of the property in perpetuity. And that will also allow us to help guide the stewardship of the site and provide advice about which areas need to be protected and preserved, which can be open to public use, and which might be possibly used for other development types. The community organization will manage and monitor the recreational activities on the site and will be the ones who are running the property as a public asset. I was able to tune into the December 3rd presentation to council from staff on this particular site, and it's quite interesting to think about what are the overlapping policy areas and protections exist for this site, but also what some of the opportunities are given its status in the official plan. And I think as part of this partnership, we're very interested and open to talking about what some of those opportunities might look like. And this is why it's so powerful to have a partnership of organizations rather than a single organization doing the work. Next slide, please, and back to you, Graham.
All right, so where are we? We have a federally incorporated sub-organization called the Old Millbrook Jail Lands Association, and we're hoping that this will be a mechanism to acquire and own the property. You have our draft vision document for protecting, enhancing, and conserving the former Millbrook Jail lands. What I really want to emphasize here is it's not just about conserving these lands. We're also open to discussions about redevelopment and economic opportunities consistent with the Cavan-Monaghan official plan. On a related project, and we're hoping that students will be able to get on board to help us with the Millbrook jail lands, we have a proposal submitted to Fleming College to promote monitoring and mapping of the watershed. Next slide.
And so we've already started reaching out to some various organizations and others to ask if they'd be interested in working with us too. And we've received some really great initial responses from a few of them. So Camp Kawartha has provided us with a letter of support for the vision for this project, as has Trout's Unlimited, the Millbrook chapter. And we'll be approaching other organizations and institutions in the new year to inform them more about what we've got planned here and ask for their support and participation as well. Obviously, a property like this, an opportunity like this, and a fundraising campaign like this is going to require a lot of players coming together in order to make this vision a reality. And so we are looking forward to working with a number of people in order to do that. Next slide, please. And to that end, we're hoping through our delegation today to have provided a little bit of information about this new organization, the partnership that's existing with Kawartha Land Trust, who's been on the landscape for a number of years, And we'd like to make two requests. One is for council to delegate or authorize staff to meet with us so that we can present our vision in more detail and discuss possible partnerships. It was very interesting at that December 3rd meeting to hear about the plan to start thinking about what a planning process for this site might look like, because that's very much what we're looking at doing now. And of course, we'd also like to formally invite the municipality to partner with us on this project, as we're going to, in 2022, be launching a campaign of information and also beginning fundraising so that when the time comes that the property is available for purchase, we'll be in a good position to be able to take advantage of that. Graham, any last words from your end?
Nope. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions.
Very good. Thank you, John and Graham. Any questions from members of council? Councillor Huntley.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. That was great, and I think it's a very noble cause, and I think yeah, we'll see what the future holds for us. With regard to your requests, I'm fully supportive of you meeting with the staff and kind of figuring out what the vision is in more detail. But I think the second one should be tied to that first one. Like I don't think we're prepared at the moment to formally partner with you, but I think that is something that could come back from staff to kind of give us some guidance on what does partnering mean, right? Like it's a big one, really. So for us just to say yes right now, I'd be a little apprehensive, but I wouldn't mind working that into that first recommendation of you meeting with staff and then coming back with some recommendations, including potentially partnering. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this particular property offers a really interesting opportunity to engage in a public visioning and public planning process for what might be possible there, and to bring multiple partners together. And certainly, I hope that we can find a plan for the site that the municipality would be happy to partner with. But I certainly understand that we should have a conversation with staff first and potentially make that part of the report back.
Let's dance before we get married.
Absolutely.
Very good. Point well made. And I think too, Ms. Hurley, maybe you can just provide us with just a reminder of the update that we received a couple of weeks ago relative to the property and the current status of the jail property.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, to council and our guests. Yes, we have, as you know, if you've watched the meeting a couple weeks ago, we have reached out to the province, and we understand that the property is what they call on a ministry hold at this time, which means that basically it's on a list to obviously divest in the future, but at this time there has been no recommendations going forward, and how long that hold will be, we're not 100% sure on that. But the township expressed an interest on that property quite some time ago. They're fully aware of that. It is going through a process of a public process that they go through first of what they do with those lands in the future, and when they get to the point of actually potentially marketing those lands. So there isn't anything more for us to do right at this moment or provide an update on when. I know we get asked quite a bit about do we know anything? When is the property going to be put for sale? That seems to be the #1 question in this community right now across the board. And at this time, obviously, we're not in a position to have those answers at this time. However, as for the first recommendation, the township staff were always willing to meet with the public and community groups, and we're happy if council supports that, we're happy to take that on and meet with your group in the future.
Very good. Thank you for the update. Along with Councillor Huntley, I'm very supportive of #1. Our staff's always willing to sit down and meet with you and hear you out and understand what we're proposing. I'm reluctant to move ahead with #2 until such time that we actually know what's going on with the jail property. And I don't mean to keep kicking the can down the road, but that's exactly what the province has done. I've been on council for 11 years now, and we've been right on the edge of the list for 11 years that it's going to be released. And I noticed there's a couple attendees also watching this today with whom I've had very involved discussions with on this particular topic. So it's certainly not to put water on the fire of your opportunity that you're bringing forward today, but understanding and recognizing that we really don't know when it's going to be available. And I know you appreciate that. With regards to the acquisition, I want some clarification with how it was that you were going to try and approach it. I believe I understood it was acquire and then fundraise, or is it fundraise and then acquire?
It would be fundraise, so it would be fundraise and then acquire. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would be looking to begin the conversations and receiving pledges of support early on, so that we know who we have supporting the project. And obviously, until Infrastructure Ontario is finished with their process, we don't even know what the proposed price tag for that property is going to be. I do have a meeting with the Honorable David Piccini early in the new year to try and talk about this project as well and see whether there's any support or information that he can provide. But taking Ms. Hurley's point, I know this has been on the books for quite some time, and it can be a bit of a black box. So I'm not sure how far we'll get along in terms of understanding the process there. But certainly, we'd be looking to use our fundraising experience and skills in order to raise the money required to make the purchase of the property.
Excellent. And just any ballpark, I know that the price hasn't even been set yet, but just you know how the real estate market has gone completely crazy. I know there's a comparable property relative to size and serviceability to the urban center of Millbrook that was listed for around $6 million. So I'm just curious, is that within the ballpark of what you're trying to fundraise for, or are you talking like $100,000?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly more than $100,000. This particular site is going to be interesting based on the the overlapping policy restrictions that are placed on it, and the soil contamination issue that I believe is still yet to be fully resolved, and who's going to take on responsibility for that testing on an ongoing basis. What the appraisers come back with for an appraised value for this property as compared to one that doesn't have similar restrictions or similar issues with it will be interesting to see. It's certainly going to be in the millions, I expect, not in the hundreds of thousands. We're grateful and fortunate right now that both provincial and federal levels of government have provided are providing some very generous funding programs to assist with property acquisition for conservation purposes. And so we have a number of different funders that we can go to help kickstart a campaign of this type, and we'll follow that up with community support. Kawartha Land Trust just last year launched a campaign in Stony Lake area to purchase a property there and raised $750,000 in 6 weeks in order to purchase that land. And so we think we can do something similar here when the time comes, obviously at a different scale if required.
Excellent. Very good. Keep up the great work. And I'm sure we're both on the same page. We'd love the province just to give it to us for nothing. That would hit both of our budgets quite well. But until such time, I would entertain a motion. Councillor Huntley, you spoke to it earlier with regards to, I don't know whether, to staff. Do you need direction specifically to meet with them? It would appear council certainly supportive of you meeting with staff, but I know, or with meeting with John and Graham and their group. I don't know whether you require direction on behalf of council to do so, but because you're always open to the discussion. But would you feel better with the direction of council? Ms. Hurley?
I don't know whether she's frozen or just staring
Mr.
at
Chairman. Sorry. Challenges with the clicker. We're always here to meet with staff. So meet with the public. So, and we can meet with them anytime. It's up to council if they want a direction. Yeah. I'm happy to follow up after this meeting and see if we can set up a time. I'm happy to do so.
Sure, and maybe we'll just formalize it with a direction of council to set it up, but just be aware, John and Graham, or anybody else that happens to be listening, you don't require a motion of council to work with our staff. You're certainly welcome to do so at any time. But with that, Councillor Huntley, do you want to make a motion?
Isn't it a direction? Is it a motion to have direction? I'm confused.
No, we're going to do a full-on motion before we confuse our poor clerk.
I'm not sure if we really want a motion, sir. The direction is that no, I don't think so. Do you want a motion?
Do you, Mayor McFadden?
It's part of our job
to receive the delegation for information.
I will receive the delegation.
All right, John and Graham, please don't leave here thinking that we didn't provide you an opportunity to meet. Clearly, you've heard you can meet with them, and don't take it that we're just going to receive your delegation as any sort of insult. So please meet with our staff, and they will bring something back, I'm sure, at some point when they've got something.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Councillor Huntley, can you handle a motion to receive the delegation?
I can do that.
All right, Councillor Huntley. Seconder, Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
Councillor Belch?
Yes.
And Mayor McFadden?
Yes, motion is approved. Once again, thank you both gentlemen, John and Graham, and we'll look forward in the future to hearing back. Council, do you need a break? Seeing none, we'll continue on. Okay. Next item, minutes of the special council meeting held December 3rd, 2021. I believe John has an amendment to this, one of the motions, 6.1. from that, from those minutes, the intent of council wasn't captured and wasn't recognized until after the minutes were brought forward. Go ahead, Mr. Conley.
So through your worship to the rest of the council, just wanted to, and I'm going to be reading from a script because that way I'm making sure that it is accurate. Because I think as the minutes appeared, it wasn't making a difference. It wasn't delineating the difference between the intent of council and the treatment of two things, one being natural core designated area and natural linkage area designations within the work. So instead, staff was wanting to confirm that as council's intent, that the natural core area designation only applies to key hydrological features and areas, that meaning watercourses and wetlands, and their applicable vegetative productive zones, that is 30 meters outside settlement areas and 15 meters inside settlement areas. What that is this is consistent with the rest of the lower tier municipalities have proposed to implement. And this is, again, in the context of the December 3rd meeting with respect to county OP and policies on the table. And then the second part of that the intent of the natural linkage area designation is to recognize key natural heritage features, that is ANSIs, areas of natural scientific interest, and significant woodlands, and their applicable vegetative protective zones, that being 30 meters. And that the natural linkage area designations does not apply to settlement areas or employment lands. So this is, again, from a standpoint of in the county context, county OP, that this is more than the rest of what the lower tier municipalities have proposed to implement. As proposed, Cavan-Monaghan would be the only lower tier utilizing a natural linkage designation. Again, I believe that was the spirit of the discussion. It was a very intense discussion on the 3rd, but I think that differentiates it, and that gives the ability for staff to be able to differentiate those two designations.
Very good. Madam Clerk, you got all that into the modified motion?
Yes, through your Mayor McFadden, I do. It's ultimately just removing it from one and making sure it's in the other. I have no problem amending that as long as council's clear with that.
Very good. Councillor Belch and Councillor Huntley, mover, seconder, okay?
Yep.
Amended minutes. Okay,
Yep.
Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
and Councillor Huntley.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion is approved. Thank you. The minutes have been amended. Next item, minutes of the regular council meeting held December 6th. There was an amendment to those. Madam Clerk. Amended to 7.1.
To section 7.1, yes, Mayor McFadden. From what I understand, we would like to send a copy of the letter.
Correct. To Premier Ford, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Stephen Clerk, and also our own MPP, Laurie Scott. It was not included in the original direction provided, and we should have, yeah, very good.
So as it stands now, this letter has only gone to the developers, but we need to CC this letter to Premier Ford, MPP, and Minister Clerk, from what I understand.
Correct. Okay, members of council, okay. Okay, mover Councillor Huntley, seconder Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
and Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Okay, motion approved. Minutes have been adopted. And straightforward, minutes of the special council budget meeting held December 9th, 2021. A motion to adopt those. Okay, Councillor Belch and Councillor Huntley. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
and Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Minutes from committees and boards. Madam Clerk, can we do them together?
Mayor McFadden, yes, we can.
Okay, items
Both are to
10.1
be
and
approved as presented.
very good. Items 10.1 and 10.2 for Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee meeting minutes and Millbrook Valley Trails Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Motion for those. Councillor Huntley, Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
and Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. Next item is an update on 1066 Sire Line. Mr. Conley.
Through your worship to rest of council. Again, this is part of the regular update with respect to 1066 Sire Line. A little bit to update. Apologize, just catching my catch my wind here. So you have before you plan report 2021-68. That's an update with respect to 1066 Sire Line. The recommendation being that council receive Report Planning 2021-68 update status report 1066 SIRE line for information. What's happened since I last reported to council this last regular meeting was that we have had comments. So it's part of the studies that were done, the agriculture impact assessment, the Hydro-G study, and environmental impact study. The county has peer comments. They use that through Stantec and ORCA, Autonomy Region Conservation Authority. We've received some peer comments, and I have those back to the consultants for any additions or amendments to those reports. On top of that, at the last meeting, I did indicate that the new study that's being done is a traffic impact study. That is something that MTO has required, and the county has supported that request. We do have a consultant engaged. The scope of work has been defined, and that work is underway. And in fact, the Ministry of Transportation has already provided the necessary traffic volume information in order to complete that work. We're looking for a time schedule of somewhere in the early part of 2022, sometime in January. What I have done is amended the Gantt chart of the timeline to give a little bit more time, because again, as that would go through peer review and comments, I'm now extended the time to March. Regrettably, I'm doing that because it is off schedule, but at the same time, I thought it better to identify it at the end of March of 2022 as the outside time in which we would bring this back to council, hoping that we can bring it forward sooner. But that said, the only other addition we added to this is that the financial impact, the last report didn't give a sort of breakdown in terms of the impact and the cost spent to date. The report itself outlines the cost of the studies in terms of what's being conducted at an aggregated level, certainly for the agricultural impact assessment, the EIS, and the Hydro-G. There's a total there in terms of the cost. The peer review costs have been outlined as well in terms of what was required from the county with Stantec and ORCA. And then on top of that, the anticipated cost right now, including HST for the traffic impact study, the grand total so far being a little bit under $86,000. And I'm hoping that if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer whatever questions council may have.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Any questions from members of council? Councilor Huntley.
Through you, Chair. I know Mr. Connolly probably just cringes every time he brings this one forward.
No, every single council meeting, I welcome the opportunity.
Back to the financial impact of it. I mean, the 85,000, I assume that's the cost of all of the studies that have been performed thus far. But I'm guessing you probably haven't tacked on staff time to that number, have you?
Through your worship, Councillor Hundley, no, I did not do that. If that is something that council is looking for, I was more in the absence of any update really from the financial impact I hadn't provided in any of the regular updates before. It was specifically around the studies and the costs associated with that. I did not include the cost of the land purchase itself or cost of staff time resources, but I can certainly in the future bring back such a cost analysis or impact if that's what council chooses.
I think it would be valuable information along with the rest of it. Like it's, part of this exercise is to determine how much effort really goes into, making this thing happen. And part of that effort is, the time it takes for us to chug through it as well, right? So it's something I would like to see. And I don't know if the rest of the council can pull me back on my island again if you want, but.
Through your worship to Councillor Huntley, more than happy to do that. I guess my only question would be, do you want me to do that as an ongoing ticker? Because again, each subsequent, my hope is that we'll have this no longer from a standpoint of updating every council meeting, but something ready before the end of March of next year. Do you want a certain point in time? Because again, if I look to think of how I put my resources in terms of staff time, that type of work, that would be a little bit more splitting of hairs, and I don't have many to split, but at the same time, I could certainly provide that. But if you wanted to have more information, I could certainly do that. Or maybe as we get to a point where we bring this forward to council for a decision, maybe that could be part of that analysis.
I would, through you, Chair, I would say it's more of a summary at the end than it is an ongoing ticker. Just kind of keeping in, I don't even know whether you can do it as accurately at this point because it's only been introduced now, but kind of, whether you can estimate how much time staff has spent on it. But for the end of the project, we don't need a running total on that. I don't think anyway.
Ms. Hurley, I see you've patiently been waiting with your hand up. Go ahead. I'll let Ms. Hurley go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Huntley, I think he answered my question. I had twofold of a question. One, we're going to have to be able to take some time on doing that because we have not tracked
Yeah.
staff time at all. So therefore, and not only Mr. Conley's staff time, but others as well. So we have not done that thus far. So we're going to need a little time to really think about that to sort of come up with a number that's reasonable. We can certainly, moving forward, we can certainly track that as well, since that is, if that's a direction of council today. And again, I was just hoping that it could be a summary at the very end and not now, because we just have not done that in the past.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, like I don't expect it to be obviously updated constantly. And I think, up until this point, an estimate is just fine, and even going forward, like I don't want to split Mr. Connolly's hair and go forward, but more,
both of them.
but more an informational question than a quantitative question.
Very good. I think a high level, would be acceptable as far as an estimate, because what would be nice to see would be the overall costing on staff's time, not granular level, high level. But how does that relate back to the fees that we would normally be collecting as a result of the going through this process? Now there's an OP and a zoning, there's a standard table that we use when we're collecting, when somebody brings forward an application, and that applied against how much staff time we're actually in a high level, not low granular, but at a high level. How do those fit? In other words, are every rezoning and official plan amendment that's going through where it's costing the general taxpayer, which it's not supposed to, but it'd be sort of nice to see checks and balances that they actually are appropriate. I know that's not going to, you can't factor in your time operating more or less as a consultant on this as the staff, because that's not what we're trying to do, but just from a processing of it, I think it would be nice to see the checks and balances that it's actually working out. Sound reasonable, Councillor Huntley?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, staff, Ms. Hurley or Mr. Conley? Again, don't be going back and looking in the day log of how many minutes you've spent on this project. That not the expectation. High level estimate would be more appropriate.
Well, certainly can provide that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I won't add in the sleepless nights on this.
That's exactly.
Those are non-billable hours you work.
Excellent. All right. Do we want specific direction on that, Ms. Hurley? Just a high-level summary of the staff's time.
That's
Motion
fine.
Received. Okay. Motion to receive and to include a high-level summary at the end. This isn't an ongoing thing to be included in each report, just a high-level summary at the end as the checks and balances. Okay, Ms. Hurley, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, correct me, Councillor Huntley, I think we decided that we would do that at the end, like a summary report at the very end, not every month.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what
That's what I just said.
was.
You did?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I just said.
I think I heard monthly, or something.
No,
but
no. Summary at the end. So
you're envisioning monthly.
I was envisioning monthly.
Moved by Ms. Hurley, seconded by Mr. Conley.
Yeah, we're giving you a Christmas present here.
All right, Councillor Huntley, we're good?
We're good.
Move that. Councillor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Belch. Okay. Okay, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
and Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. Next item, 11.2, report CAO report and capital status. Any member of council have any questions on any of the projects in the report? Or is there anything you wish to bring us up to date with, Ms. Hurley, that jumps out?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't think so. Most of the projects we've identified, we've moved over to 2022. Obviously, with as we move forward with our budget, we'll also update our projects once council approves our budget as well. I think we're okay. We did speak, actually, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just one thing. We did talk about potentially coming back with a policy, a report on the lighting. And I don't believe Mr. Hancock's still on here, is he? Oh, yes, he is. Since Mr. Hancock is still there, Mr. Hancock, we did get some information that our lighting is not able to connect to multiple outlets. Did we follow up on that? I'm not sure if I can, where I'm going with this, council, is I'm not sure if I can draft a policy except for saying we can't connect based on the recent information from Mr. Hancock.
I think we were in touch. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. We were in touch with Lancer Electric, who's been doing the downtown light replacement. They're saying that the typical outlet on the street lights was designed for the most part for the decorative Christmas lighting and things of that nature, and wasn't really put in place for the heavier loads that you might see at events. So he is suggesting, and we're waiting for sort of a response to an email I sent to him. He's suggesting that we possibly look at a separate type of electrical production, such as a silent generator or something like that. Might be better for events than trying to use the street light receptacle. So I was waiting for a response from him, and then Ms. Hurley and I think we're supposed to put together some policy or something that really looked at how we might handle these going forward, that did not run into issues with possibility of the lights being out or something happening in the light receptacle that was causing problems, and that we just have a separate source of energy for events in the downtown. That's kind of the bottom line.
Very good.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may, so it might not be so much a policy, but we'll certainly report back to council on this item, so that I would like to talk to Ms. Syed as well a little bit about this. So I just wanted to let you know there are definitely limitations to our lighting fixtures in the downtown, but maybe there's an alternative solution that we'll report back to you on.
Absolutely. Nope, makes sense. If the capacity is not there, it doesn't matter what our policy is, they're not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Any other questions from members of council with regards to any of the items outstanding on the list? Councillor Huntley.
Sorry, just through you, Chair. I guess I'm a little bit of clarity on that last one. I guess the concept of a policy doesn't really make sense. We're putting a cart before a horse here. We have to figure out what we're dealing with before we can have a policy. But are we just saying we can't do it, or are we investigating what can be done, and if we wanted to do it, what that would entail? Like, I'm a little confused on where that's left. I'm sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Huntley, I don't have that answer yet. I don't think we're looking to say no, that's not an option, and therefore we're done. I think we're looking to say, if the answer is no to our lighting fixtures, what other options could we explore, and then report back to you on that.
But also, what would have to be done to the lighting fixtures in order to make it possible? Is that also in that list, or?
I'm not. My understanding from Lancer is there isn't anything more that can be done, because it's just the way the lights were done. So that's my understanding. When Mr. Hancock and I had a conversation with Lancer Electric, those lights they're developed, or that box that they have on that system is the way it was purchased at the time, etc. So my thought is that staff reconnect and see what other alternative solutions could we come up with. And no matter what that would be, I would still report back to you.
Correct. So through you, Chair, whatever you decide what the alternatives are, what you require from council to make any of those alternatives happen. And on top of that, at the end, we come up with a policy on how it works. But kind of the steps.
Yeah, so I will report back to you on that before we even think about what that policy might look like. So I just wanted to let you know that there are some challenges with the lighting posts right now.
Gotcha. Now I'm on the same page.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
And I guess too, just for clarity, so that we ensure that we don't go around in circles on this one. If the underlying electrical lines simply don't have the capacity and the network, obviously, that are currently supporting LED lights as opposed to even the higher wattage bulbs, if it's not going to support significant additional units being plugged into it, then just make that known. And of course, there's always an alternative, being you lay additional lines, but then there's the associated cost that comes with it. And I think it would just help for council to digest that the overall cost would literally be to lay new lines specifically for the dedication of electrical circuits. And if that's the case, that's fine. It can be a council decision at that time with an appropriate price tag. But I think the longer we continue to go around in circles, if the physical limitation of the wires themselves is not going to permit it on the circuits that they're on, then it doesn't matter. We're not going to have a policy. It's simply, we can't, they weren't designed for it, and you can't continue. And is there alternatives? Absolutely. You can provide a secondary quiet generators as Mr. Hancock's. We can put it back to the BIA to come up with their plan, or we can lay new lines that provide that electrical outlet. But obviously there's costs that go with those. And I think it would really help, because this isn't a situation of just council making an arbitrary policy that's going to hurt the downtown or the BIA in any ways. Bottom line, if the capacity is not there, it's not there. It doesn't matter what our policy is, it won't support it. So I think that's the important part to capture in that report is, here's your options and what is it we wish to move ahead with. And if the one is not a possibility, then please outline it's not, because the wattage is limited to such and such on the main street, and that makes sense.
Still the same page. Thank you.
I think so.
Mr. Hancock?
I'm good.
Yep.
Mr. Hancock?
I think I'm on the same page too.
Fantastic. Alrighty.
Go
ahead, Councillor Huntley.
To Ms. Hurley, the noise bylaw review, are we not complete that, or is there still something outstanding?
I'm going to defer to Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mayor McFadden, to Councillor Huntley. So at the conclusion of our last meeting, we sent the draft to our lawyer for review, and we just don't have a copy back yet.
Oh, okay.
So once we get the review back from Ed, I'm hoping to have it for our January 17th meeting.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you, Ms. Page.
No problem.
So that's more like an 85, 90% then instead of 75, Councillor Huntley?
I would think so.
Pretty close.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions on this? If not, a motion to receive this and be on the same page. Councillor Huntley, Councillor Belch, Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Is that the Cindy Page page? Councillor Belch?
Yes.
Mayor McFadden?
Yes.
Councillor Huntley, I couldn't resist. I apologize for being unprofessional, but I couldn't resist.
Yes.
We have a unanimous yes, Ms. Page. Motion is approved. Next item is Council Committee verbal reports. Councillor Belch, anything to report?
No, the Ganaraska has they've taken a rest and did not have a meeting for December, and will reconvene I think later in January.
Very good. Excellent. I noticed several transition plans coming through, and I apologize if I've lost track, because we're the proud recipients of 3 conservation authorities. Has the Ganaraska Conservation Authority put forward their transition plan yet, Ms. Page?
Through your Mayor McFadden, yes, they have. All 3 have been submitted.
Very good. Maybe we can ask Mr. Hancock to hit the mute button.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Okay.
He may have heard you.
Super. Okay, and that's it. Councillor Huntley, yours?
None at this time, actually.
Excellent. Motion to receive those appropriate. Oh, it wasn't Mr. Hancock. Who is it?
Through you, Mayor McFadden, it's the fire chief, and I'm knocking on the glass of respect. I've already told him I apologize. It's not Wayne.
Okay, I didn't see any other open mics. It was the clerk all along. Okay.
It was.
Yeah, I was wondering why I was getting the blame on that one.
I muted you so you couldn't defend yourself, Wayne. So I apologize.
I don't even remember where we left off. Are we at the motion to
We're looking for a mover and a seconder to receive your council committee vote.
Okay,
updates.
I got Councillor Belch and Councillor Huntley. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
Mayor McFadden?
Yes.
And Councillor Belch?
Yes.
Motion is approved. There is no general business, nor correspondence for information, nor correspondence for action. So we go into bylaws. Madam Clerk, before I read them, both are relevant.
Yes, they are, Mayor McFadden. There are housekeeping that we generally bring in for 2022. One of them is the levy, and then the other is the borrowing.
Very good. Being bylaw number 2021-79 to provide for the levy and collection of 2021 or 2022 interim realty taxes and penalties for non-payment thereof, and bylaw number 2021-80 being a bylaw authorizing the temporary borrowing of funds to offset the current expenditures of the Township of Cavan-Monaghan, be read a first, second, third time, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal attached thereto. Moved by Councillor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Mayor McFadden,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
and Councillor Belch.
Yes.
Motion is approved. There's no unfinished business. Any notices of motion? Seeing none. Confirming bylaw being bylaw number 2021-81, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting held December 20th, 2021. You read it first, second, third time. Signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal attached thereto. Moved by Councillor Belch and seconded by Councillor Huntley. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
and Mayor McFadden.
Yes, motion is approved. A motion to adjourn. We got Councillor Huntley and Councillor Belch. Madam Clerk, recorded vote.
Councillor Huntley,
Yes.
Councillor Belch,
Yes.
and Mayor McFadden.
Yes. Council is now adjourned. There are upcoming events, meetings. Cavan Monaghan Public Library Board meeting is Tuesday, January 18th, 2022 at 7 p.m. It's a hybrid meeting. Municipal Revitalization and Heritage Advisory Committee meeting Thursday, January 20th, 2022 at 9 a.m. via Zoom, and Millbrook Valley Trails Advisory Committee meeting Monday, January 24th, 2022 at 5 p.m. via Zoom. And just a reminder that there will be a further public meeting relative to the cannabis conversation, and that would be on January 17th as part of the next regular council meeting on January 17th. Any other items to add? Councillor Huntley, go ahead.
You forgot about the 25th, I believe, of December.
It is, despite everything going on in the world with COVID, I believe the 25th is still on.
Excellent.
Very good. All right. Thanks, everybody.